This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout.
This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. Here we go. We're halfway through season 13, and tonight we have a discussion that's been on our back burner for quite a while. Barbed hooks or barbless? And does it really matter? Should we always go barbless? Nope. The answer isn't that simple. So the Troutbitten guys are here for a conversation and a few thoughts about barbs on hooks. First, let me introduce my best fishing buddies, my most trusted friends and fellow partners in this Troutbitten project. So hey, we have Josh Darling back. Jarling's in the house. No audio troubles at all.
No audio troubles.
You're back. Tell us about the hunt with Bo, the filming with Bo Martonic.
It was good. So we were originally going to film a Pennsylvania hunt, and he ended up tagging out in Pennsylvania. So we pulled an audible and went up to New York, which he had tags for, and we hunted a huge piece of state forest that he had not been into for a long time. So a lot of it was spent just hiking the mountains and scouting. And it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. Were you hunting or filming?
I was only filming.
How'd it go?
Good. No shots fired, but it'll be a ongoing story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The season's not over. I think he's going to go back up there.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I love the last video you put out.
Oh, thank you very much.
High quality. You guys watched that, didn't you?
Yeah, what was that? Coal Country?
Yeah.
The Mountain Book.
Yeah, what was the title?
Yeah, it was called Coal Country. Yeah, we went down to West Virginia and we were hunting reclaimed coal mines, and it was like a spot and stock style hunting, which you don't normally do on the East Coast. And so,
Josh,
cool.
You'd like this. I was over at my in-laws yesterday. There's a kind of a family lunch, and my father-in-law and all of us, we always watch hunting on YouTube or waiting for the food to get ready. And I was like, you got to watch Josh's video. And we pulled it up and watched the whole thing, start to finish with, 15 of us sitting around. Even all the schools were into it. Usually it's like the last thing they want to watch, and they couldn't look away.
That's
so
super
did a good
cool.
job.
It's like 40 plus minutes.
It was like 48 minutes or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
good quality video.
oh my.
Yeah, it's great.
It is. It's artistic. It's entertaining. You don't need to be a hunter to enjoy it.
Agreed.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you
Love
very
it.
much, guys.
You think the next one would be similar? I mean, you're trying to tell a similar story in a similar way, basically.
Yeah. It's a little bit more run and gun because there's a lot less prep that went into it because it's a new state and it wasn't the original plan. But hopefully it'll come together in a similar way in the end.
Nice, buddy. Now you just need a lot of storage space
That's right.
to download all
Yeah,
those
I got
files.
enough now, I think. We're all set.
Well, good to have you back.
Thank you.
Hey, Austin Dando. How you doing over there?
Doing pretty well.
Yeah, there he is. Austin and I fished together the other day. He showed me a secret spot full of stock trout. It was pretty good.
Oh, you caught the
Hey.
stocked ones.
No.
Yeah, you did. Actually,
Well, like,
Dom was like, "Oh, that was a nice rainbow."
I said, there's
He was
another one.
upset he didn't catch it.
You've got that
There's a-
stocky drift real dialed in,
I
huh?
said, there's another stocky. There's another stocky. We were catching browns, and he goes, oh, that's a wild brown. I said, looks. Bill would have definitely said those were stocked browns until the nice one I caught, Austin. Then that
I
was a
actually
wild
disagree.
one.
Well, maybe the ones I didn't see.
Right. Anyway, I'm just messing around.
I'm glad
Austin
now
and
you
I-
won't go back.
We've only fished together a couple times since like Argentina, right?
Yeah,
just
I
a
know.
couple times.
Yep.
Life's busy. Dr. Trevor Smith, is your life busy?
Oh my gosh. Yep. Sure is. Yeah, the kids keep me busy most of the time right now. And hunting season keeps me busy on top of
Yeah.
that. And yeah, life does feel busy.
Hey, we got to get our
Right.
Christmas party lined up,
Yeah.
I was
That's
going to
always
text about that yesterday.
right?
Yeah, my wife-
Becky,
Yeah.
Becky has some dates. I got to get them to you.
Yeah.
We
You already got the tree behind you.
I do. I unplugged it because it was distracting. But yeah, Becky has 11 trees again. 10 trees again. I'm sure
Love
she'll
it.
find a place for 11. Just put one in the attic. Why not? You know?
That hangout really has been kind of a highlight for the season the last couple of years. That's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Becky shows off her hosting skills as well. She's
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
quite the hostess.
Well, somebody's got to come over and look at the trees.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect opportunity.
She's a good home decorator for sure.
She is.
Yeah.
All right. When we got this house, she was all of a sudden in her element. And even when I do home repairs, I'm like, well, at least I'm doing it for myself instead of for the next person who owns it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really have any plans on moving, is my point. Della, you do a lot of home repair. Bill Dell is in the house, and he might be the best of all of us at home repair. I'm the worst.
I
Deli?
don't know. Austin's really good.
He is.
I don't have as much patience as Austin. I like to get it done.
You're efficient though. You get a lot done
He
quickly.
does get a lot done. You tackle big jobs too.
Yeah. Like the room I'm in now, I gutted down to the studs and redid ceiling, floor, and wall last year.
know.
And now you have a trellis, or what'd you call it?
Yeah, I built an arbor
The
last
arbor.
week. Yeah, last
that probably
weekend.
happened in like 2 hours for Deli.
It was 4 hours.
Built an arbor for the birds.
Yes.
Looks good.
Got to put up the feeders. We'll see.
Love it. Yeah, you guys want to move into it? Let's do it. That's what everybody sounds like. That's why we introduce everybody, so you can know what these guys sound like. Hey, I should say though, we're missing Matt Grobe because he broke his ribs fighting a big fish. Is that fair? Is that what happened? This group text is
Based on
pretty
the
much what he
information
said,
that we know, that seems like an accurate way of saying it.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, he caught a
It's
big
a
fish.
heck of a fish. Yeah.
It is. It's a big fish. He sent us the picture, and I guess he said he's been having problems with his ribs, and fighting that fish kind of put the nail in the coffin. He's going to the hospital.
Call him Captain Ahab.
Hey, now. Almost could have.
Hey, I have an idea. We are in a serious competition here for the reader of the designated reader for Troutbitten. And Trevor, you weren't here, so Austin had to
That's
fill
okay.
in. He did a hell of
He's
a
a
job.
good reader.
I was
He's a
just
good
say
reader.
he did a hell of a
I
job.
like his voice better than mine.
Well, I got an email, and maybe we'll read that someday. But I got an email just a few hours ago saying that, they said who was the better reader, and I'm not going to share it yet. But anyway, we're still in a heated competition here, and I got 2 questions. Trevor, will you read question 1? Listener question. Here we go.
All right. Troutbitten gentlemen. Oh, hello, this is Alex Whitaker, a fly angler from Idaho. Thank you for a wonderfully complex and ever-growing bank of knowledge. Your podcasts are my favorite, and the recent videos are a perfect companion. This is not a question, but I wanted to offer some advice if that's permitted. I just read your Troutbitten piece about imagining a target, fish to the fish. And what is written there is perhaps the best approach for any angler on the water, because most times we don't see the fish. Sometimes, maybe too many times, I catch myself fishing at random, casting here and there, stripping and drifting. And it's those moments when I rein myself in, when I can choose a small part of the creek and make a good cast until I'm satisfied. Then I pick another spot. I realize too that the smaller I make these spots, the better I fish. Really, your article said the same thing. It's an excellent summary and a reminder for fishermen of any age and experience. If you're not catching fish, do this. Take care, Troutbitten crew. Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for...
That's good advice. That's why I wrote an article that's like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing that on the river today.
Mm-hmm.
Things were real hot at first, and they died down, and I started losing confidence, and I realized I need, to have smaller targets, know that the fish are there, pick a spot, fish it really hard, and then move to the next spot. Maybe moving means 2 feet over, but you know what I mean? You guys do that?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that a lot. Dom, I don't know, it was maybe 2016. I remember fishing local creek with you. We were fishing an egg bite, and it was right around the time you wrote that article, I think. And we were just having the discussion about fishing tight to a target, and really, like, let's say you can look into the water, but picking out each rock and deciding where in that lane you're going to end up, or where in that piece of water surface you want to end up. But we were fishing eggs, and what was really helpful in that scenario is that you could often see the fly throughout the drift. So it was even a better exercise in fishing to a target, because you could really visualize the whole drift around what your target was. So if you get the opportunity to do that, pay attention to what that looks like underwater and where your flies end up and stuff.
It's just something I come back to all the time. I need to get more specific, let's say.
Yeah, I think that principle follows through with a whole lot of different outdoor sports that require accuracy. And I think, the more specific of a target you can pick, you're like aim small, miss small, kind of that whole concept.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think fishing with a purpose and fishing purposefully,
That's what it is too.
yeah, I think is is super good advice.
I was fishing streamers today. Like I said, it started off really hot. And then hours later, I was trying to adapt and I just wanted to keep fishing streamers. And I started just picking gaps, the soft spots. I was in pocket water and I'm like, I'm just going to fish the soft stuff. And I would try to hold the streamer in there as long as possible. Maybe a little twitch, doing a lot of using your Grinch deli, doing a lot of like super pause stuff, but just a little twitch and then just hold it as long as I could in that one. So I was just fishing the gaps, the soft parts of pockets. And, you know, sometimes they're less than a foot wide and maybe 1, 2, 3 feet long till it would merge with the next pocket. It was pretty, I don't know, complex pocket water. Anyway, that's what I was kind of thinking of. And then I got home and Alex's question was there, or not question, but comment was there. I was like, oh, we're using this on the podcast for sure. Just kind of the same mindset. That's what I needed to do today. All right, Trevor, you did a nice job reading. I want to commend you. That was smooth, right? Sounded good.
Yeah.
Don't be shy about your skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flaunt them.
Flaunt
know
them.
what your strengths are.
Yeah.
Austin Dando, what do you have for your voice for question number 2? This is going to lead us right into our topic.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
All right, question number 2, and this question is from Ben Eggers by way of email.
I didn't know how to pronounce that. Good job. You just went with it.
Going with it. He writes, "Hey Dom, I love the articles, videos, and especially the podcast. I've listened to every podcast. The knowledge you and the boys share each week has been essential to my growth as an angler."
The boys.
The boys. "I really appreciate everything you guys do for the sport, and I really liked the ethics pod last week." Nice. "I've heard you guys recommend the use of barbless hooks. I know you're incredibly balanced in your opinions and lead discussions with an educational mindset, but is there any chance you could soapbox on an upcoming episode on the advantages/necessity of barbless hooks? And any other choices we can make on the fly tying bench? Natural versus synthetic materials, perhaps? To protect the resource? Barbless hooks are required in my area, but for some reason you can still buy barbed hooks in my state, and I see pre-made flies tied on barbed hooks more often than not, which blows my mind. Thanks for everything you do. Once again, cheers, Ben Eggers."
All right. So Ben's question really leads us into the topic for tonight. Most often, I got to choose questions that we either haven't covered before or questions that are kind of commonplace that come up a lot. So Ben's question really is both of those. And I've answered the barbless hook question a bunch of times in emails and messages. And I actually answered Ben the other day here too. And I'm not sure, but I think he was a little surprised by my answer. These days, many new anglers, well, like new anglers and experienced anglers too, I should say, seem to think that barbless hooks are just a given. Like that's what we should all be fishing. That's what everything should be. And Ben kind of gets to that in the end of his question there, wondering why manufacturers of hooks even make hooks with barbs at all anymore. So we're going to have a discussion tonight, and I'm curious to see where this goes. I think it's safe to say that each of us has fished long enough that we've all used both barbed and barbless flies. We've also used barbs on lures and bait hooks because each of us kind of grew up fishing. Everybody knows this by now. If you've listened to these Troutbitten podcasts, you kind of know our history. We won't go through that. I do think that maybe some anglers who jump right into the fly fishing game, especially for trout, are exposed to like another sentiment. So their reference points are different. And like anything else, what might seem almost outlandish to one person, like barbs on a hook, can seem like no big deal to another. The landscape is changing for trout anglers. No doubt you've already noticed another truck at your favorite access point and seen more anglers on the water. For those looking for new challenges and fishing opportunities, Trout Routes has the data to help you avoid the crowds and explore new public water. Trout Routes has mapped more than 50,000 trout streams across the country with curated, detailed maps of public land and access points. Trout Routes has developed integrated and interactive data, putting the tools in your hands to research new water and help you navigate in the wild to know exactly where you stand in the current. It's still up to you to find those deep pools and undercuts, but Trout Routes helps you get on the water, connecting you with resources like fly shops and stream gauges for trout water across the country. Download Trout Routes in the App Store today. Then use the code Troutbitten for 20% off your membership at maps.troutroutes.com. For over a decade, Smith Creek has designed and built outstanding gear for the serious angler. Smith Creek's net holster is the perfect solution to hold your favorite net. I've been using mine every day on the water for over 9 years. Its ergonomic design helps you draw your net quickly when you need it, while keeping your net firmly in place and out of the way when you don't. Made from rugged materials and hand-assembled, Smith Creek's net holster is built to last. All Smith Creek gear is backed by their outstanding customer service no matter where or when you bought it. To stay up to date on their latest specials, follow Smith Creek on Instagram at SmithCreekNZ. Quality you can depend on from a brand you can trust. Smith Creek. Guys, where do you want to start? Barbed hooks or barbless? And does it really matter?
I use both. I guess I'm a bad person.
Deli, yeah, knuckle dragger.
Yep.
Listen to that guy.
So I guess when I fish dry dropper, the majority of my dry flies that I want to fish dry dropper with, I leave a barb on because I
Cool.
like to tie to the bend of the hook.
Yeah, there's a really good point that maybe not everybody thinks about.
I've tried it barbless and I've lost like that whole bottom rig. It doesn't happen very often, but like, maybe every 100 casts, the dropper just disappears with the whole leader system there.
You're saying it slides off of a barbless hook because there's
Yeah.
basically nothing to stop it.
So I think if you have the barbed hook and then you pinch it,
Yeah.
I think that little nub that's there will hold it.
Barely, but it does, and I
Yeah.
agree with you.
I agree.
Yep,
Yeah.
That's what I usually do.
And so I guess that's why I tie it with a barbed hook and then I make the
Mm.
decision on the stream.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Sloop talking about that once and how he was so upset that some of the pre-made flies, I don't know if he was buying pre-tied flies or something, but he's like, I'm buying them all and they don't have a barb on them. I want it to be up to me if I mash the barb or not.
I know.
And the thing that he mentioned was
Don't
exactly
make my
what you just said,
decisions.
Bill, was that, you crush that barb down, you get that little bump, and he wanted it for that type of application.
And the same thing goes if you want to tractor trailer flies, like
Mhm.
nymphing.
Right.
So when I say tractor trailer, I mean you're tying it again. The first fly you tie onto the end of your tippet, and the
Mhm.
second fly you tie a chunk of tippet to the bend of your hook, and then cut off whatever you want, and then tie the second fly to that. And
Mhm.
again, the barbed fly, a barbless fly, it will slide off at
Yeah.
times.
I think it happens more under the water, for me anyway, when I've done that rather than dry dropper.
Yeah,
But it's even worse with the two nymphs. Yeah.
there is the option to create a tag there. Like I
Sure.
do that normally, but there are a few occasions and a few rigs
Mhm.
that I like to fish kind of tractor trailered like
Same.
that.
And then the other argument would be, well, just go back out of the eye. But still, doesn't drift the same way. And some flies, like if I come out of the eye, things start to tangle up. Some flies with materials like legs and extra hackle and extra things on that nymph. We're talking about nymphs now. It'll tangle up too much if you kind of tractor trailer out of the eye. So I'm with you, Bill. I want the option of coming off of the bend of the hook sometimes. And like Sloop said, let me decide. Don't decide for me. I'll do it myself.
To tie it back to the ethics question, I guess when I first started, I felt it was more important to land a fish than I did to, make sure I had the least impact on it. And so the more fish I've caught over the years, the more I feel like it's more acceptable if I do lose a couple fish. If it is a barbless hook, you're going to lose more fish with a barbless hook. You have to come to grasp with it's going to be, I guess, it might be slightly better for the fish. I guess where I see the biggest impact is brook trout. Brook trout will inhale a fly.
And they're small usually.
And they're small.
Usually, fair enough.
So to me, it's a bigger impact. So if I'm fishing for brook trout, a lot of times I'm a lot more careful because that small fish, that barb is more impactful to them versus maybe if I'm fishing for brown trout that are, average of 10 to 15 inches, there might not be as much impact.
Good point.
In all the research that's been done on mortality of catch and release fishing, there's one variable that stands pretty head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to hooks and hooking, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you guys want to take a stab at it.
I think it's the size of the hook, not the barb.
Wire size.
Yeah? No? No.
Is it like treble versus non?
No. It's anatomic location of the hook.
Oh, where it hooks into the fish.
You know, where it embeds, basically. Which really is an interesting point, because I think that point really connects to a lot of the discussions that we could have about this. And I would just start by introducing the concept of active versus passive angling. And mainly, right, like we would think about bait fishing as like a passive angling versus active fishing, which is a lot of what we do in fly fishing.
Yes.
But not all fly fishing, but most of it. And so the likelihood of a trout to inhale and swallow a fly or any sort of hook is definitely related to the type of fishing we're doing. So bait fishing obviously has far more swallowed hooks than does fly fishing. And there's a big mortality tag associated with that because of the likelihood of hooking gills, hooking deep in the throat.
Oh, yeah.
And then what's interesting is even with that, so the mortality of a deeply swallowed hook, if you try to remove it, it's like 50-50. A lot of those fish die.
Makes sense.
But if you cut the line, the mortality is about 25% if you don't try to take it out. So it's just kind of an interesting subpoint. But I think it's just interesting, like the more and more research that's been done, and there's been quite a few studies done in the past 5 to 10 years on this.
Yeah.
Because I think there's been more debate and more interest in the regulations. Barbs don't really show up much in the evidence as far as a differentiator in mortality.
Yeah,
I do think it's hard to argue that it's not damaging a fish more to have a barb, right? Because it's just a bigger hole.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably witnessing death on the spot. They're not finding out whether, like with a barb, one of the things that you have to deal with is an elongated period of time of getting that out, and you're keeping the fish out of the water, sometimes significantly longer than you would have otherwise, and you're shaking their head or whatever it is. But studies like that are not going to measure whether the fish continues living after being released. They're just determining whether it's dying right there or not. And there's no way to really study, like if you keep a fish out of the water too long and it sort of swims away just fine, you have no idea whether that fish makes it or not.
Sure.
So one interesting point on that, there was a study in 2021, interestingly, done on and it was done using stocked fish that were tagged. And if you turned the fish in to the game or to the Fish Commission, there was a cash prize for each tagged fish. And they would keep those fish in the hatchery in pens and observe them for the next 10 days.
No kidding.
And they had everyone that turned in one of those fish, and granted, this is why the data always is kind of like weird on these things, but you had to write down, like, so what was the length of time that it was out of the water?
I know.
What kind of hook were you using?
How the hell did you get it to the Fish Commission?
How did you transport it?
Right.
I put it
How
in my
did
water
you transport it? I know. But
Your fish would fit in your water bottle.
Yeah, there you go. Good one, Deli.
that's what I like. As I read a lot of these studies, I'm obviously struck with the fact that there can be a lot of messy data.
Yes.
But that was one of the studies that really showed anatomic site of hook set was by far and away the biggest predictor of the future mortality of that fish, outside of barb, and then, like handling was certainly a factor. There were like 5 other factors that included the time that the fish was fought, like playing time.
Oh yeah.
The handling,
It's big.
the temperature of the water to begin with.
Sure.
Man, there's one other I'm forgetting. But anyway, there are some other factors that certainly play into it. But it was really interesting just how, to me, what I came away from a lot of the studies kind of being more aware of is that it's really more the style of fishing that I think we do in this sort of tight line approach and this, where we have so much of, we set the hook almost immediately on take, right? And I just was thinking back on how many fish, that I've nymphed, have I ever had a hook buried deeper than, the lip or the, it's just not, it doesn't happen.
No.
unless you really are unaware if you're drifting, you accidentally hooked one. But even then, like they're not swallowing an artificial fly. So it's just interesting. Like I think we maybe attribute some of the decreased mortality inappropriately to the lack of a barb, when it may honestly have more to do with active presentation.
I know for me, like, I'm thinking about this maybe from a streamer fishing perspective. And I've definitely killed fish, streamer fishing or moving barbed streamer flies, but it was often related to kind of what you said earlier, where they're hooked. So certain areas they bleed a lot out of versus another. So out of the lip, I've pulled plenty of barbs out of a trout's lip and not gotten really any blood. It's mostly flesh and hard cartilage. And then, but if you hook them in the tongue or deep in the tongue or in that gill area, and then you pull a big gashing wound out when you remove the barb, they'll just start bleeding profusely. I've had them die right in my net. That's one of the reasons I don't love to do that anymore.
As far as hooking them deep, and like you were saying, Trevor, man, I don't know. I was thinking it might be 1 in 300, 400 fish or something like that I see. Like it's actually, wow, this is actually pretty deep. But I've hooked fish really deep. Because I used to fish minnows and worms when I was a kid and in my teens, and I know what hooking a fish deep is really like. And I don't know if I've ever had a fish swallow a fly like that. But the streamers, I'll say, I get that deep hooking the most with streamers, second most was with dry flies, and probably the least, like you said, with nymphs and wets. Like at night, that never happens, almost never happens. The streamers thing is interesting because it's a bigger hook. You would think that they would eat it or take it deeper less often.
I think sometimes what happens with the streamer, especially if it's articulated, is they get the front hook. Let's say they get the front hook, and then you're fighting it, and they get that back hook caught up in them, and that's going to be deeper.
Yeah, I've had times when it's like they swallowed the whole fly, and even articulated streamers. Deli, you've seen that, right?
Yeah. I guess for me, I think the flies that I quote dig out of fish I feel like is dry flies more often because they just seem to suck it in. I've had them on the roof of their mouth. Like I feel like that's one fly that I seem to always hook deeper. And back to the barb thing, like it doesn't seem to matter whether it's barbed or not barbed. I've hooked a fish with a barbless hook, and it, like to Trevor's point, like if you hook it in the gills, or if you hook it in the lower mouth, let's say somewhere, it's going to bleed a lot worse.
Yeah.
And so either way, the barb does put a bigger hole, but the barbless will still puncture a hole down there. It's less impactful, but it's still impactful.
For me, excellent polarized lenses are a critical piece of gear every day that I'm on the water. Tajima Direct has changed what I see in the river. Tajima Direct offers top-tier lens replacement services with the best polarized lens technology on the market. They offer both prescription and non-prescription lenses, so you can upgrade the lenses in your favorite frames with purpose-built lens tints that are specifically developed for fly fishing. Tajima's patented technology cuts glare and enhances clarity like no other lens that I've worn. I especially love their low-light specific yellow-green 40 polarized lens, which is perfect for early mornings, late evenings, and the cloudy days that we all enjoy so much. Tajima Direct offers excellent service and the best lenses on the market, along with much better pricing than your local eye doctor can offer. Clear vision and more detail with less strain so you can see more fish. That's what Tajima Direct delivers. Visit tajima-direct.com. That's TAJIMA-direct.com. Upgrade your lenses and see what you've been missing. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques inspired by the World Fly Fishing Championships. Tactical Fly Fisher's goal is to supply you with the latest and best fly fishing gear and to help you learn how to use it through their videos and books. Whether you need flies, fly tying supplies, a new rod or reel, or any other fly fishing equipment, they've got you covered. Check them out at tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TB15 to get 15% off one order, excluding rods, reels, waders, and boots. Visit tacticalflyfisher.com. You know what we should really talk about is like regular barb versus micro barb. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like most barbs these days, especially fly tying manufacturer hooks, let's just put it that way, they're micro barbs. And what we mean by that is really small. I mean, come on, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know what we mean by micro barb versus, that standard, much bigger, maybe 3 or 4 times the size barb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever gotten a hook stuck in you?
Well, that's why I don't. That's why I pinch most everything down. If I don't buy barbless, then I almost always pinch it down because yes, I've had them stuck in me. I've had them stuck in my clothes. In my vest,
Sticking in other people.
Yeah. I once did that to my friend Austin.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I had to go to the
Right in the
hospital
nose.
twice to get a hook removed from my.
So that would certainly be a barbed hook, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just going to slide right out.
Yeah. So the first time I had a daredevil stuck in the back of my neck that I
Ooh, yeah.
I had 2 hooks in, and so I had to go to the ED to get it removed.
You'll ever have to press it all the way through, then pinch it down, then pull it back through.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So the second time I got a hook stuck in me, my dad saw the doctor in the ED. He was like, "Oh, well, you just got to bend it back through, and then cut the
Oh, yeah.
barb off." And so,
That's fun.
so I don't know. It was like 12 or something, and my dad's like, "Well, try this," and it was in the bottom of my foot.
Yep.
Because I was quote playing with my tackle box in the living room, and so I got a hook stuck in the bottom of my foot.
Oh, you weren't even fishing.
No.
Yeah.
And so he was like, "Well, we'll just do what they did at the hospital." And I was like, "No." Like he tried it a couple times and I was like, "No." And so, yeah, back to the ED to get a hook removed.
Should
Again.
have left it in your book bag.
Yep. Should have put it in the book bag.
That's right. Well,
But that's a good reason.
just debarb them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Debarb them.
Debarb them. It makes life so much easier. I fish saltwater. You guys know this. I get to fish saltwater 6-7 days a year, if that. I do. I debarb everything in the saltwater just because it's easy. Now, those are serious barbs too. Those are what I'm not going to call micro barbs. Those are regular barbs. And whatever, I'm fishing bucktails, but those bucktail, and I tie these bucktails up at my fly tying desk. They're almost like flies, gentlemen, right? A bucktail is pretty much a fly with a big lead head on it. Anyway, I'm fly fishing with my spinning rod.
What about for species that have harder mouths, like maybe a striper, Dom? Do you think that barb matters more or less?
Well, I think if you fight a fish, I'm going to say the right way or well or properly, then you're not going to lose it. Deli said earlier, Deli said it. He just flatlined it and said, you're just going to catch more fish with a barb. I guess I agree with that. Like
Land more
statistically,
fish?
Yeah, land more fish. Land, that's fair. I know where you're going with that, but let me answer that. You're going to land more fish. Once they're hooked, they're going to stay hooked more. Even with a micro barb, yes, they're going to stay hooked more. I will grant you that. But I'm going to say that percentage is really low, like maybe 1, 2, 3% more. If you got to keep tension. Everything in fish fighting is predicated on just keep the tension to the fly. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're good at fish fighting, you're always going to have tension. That hook is not going to slide out, whether it's barbless or a pinched barb or a micro barb or a standard barb. It's not going to slide out. If everything goes right in the fight, you have control. That hook doesn't have a chance to back out. Now, I know I'm speaking like from, if everything goes perfectly, but I'm saying like the better we get as an angler, well, the less we kind of need those barbs. And
I think it's a good point.
even in the saltwater then, Austin, I pinch them down. Again, like Bill said, I'm fishing for fluke, man. Fluke and striper. I'm not keeping anything really, and I don't really care. I mean, I want to land the fish, but it's not going to break my heart if I lose something because I didn't have a barb on there. But it's certainly going to save my forearm. I had a hook in my forearm. I just pulled it right out because it was barbless. In my fingers and my clothes and whatever else.
Yeah.
If you were to guess, by fishing barbless hooks, what do you think the percentage is in the number of fish you lose because
He
of
just said that. He said 1 to 3.
I mean, seriously, like 1, 2, 3%. What do you think, Del? More?
Depends on the type of fly.
Everything depends. Yeah, I gotcha.
I don't know. I would say it's like 10 or 15%.
Really? Now, I'm saying once it's hooked, and Austin was bringing up a point. What were you going to say? What's your point, Austin? Because you said you talking about the fight or like the hooking.
Yeah, so like I was saying, depending on the style of fish, like I know some folks who fish for muskie want to keep that barb on there because they've got those hard mouths, and they feel like it helps hold the fish more than a barbless hook. Or maybe once you really drive that point home, it's less likely to shake out, and with erratic movements and head shakes like a muskie can have, that maybe where
that's a lot more than a
tension
trout.
could be reduced in those scenarios. So that's what I was curious.
I don't debarb my musky flies because I feel like you need every hope in the world to keep those fish hooked.
I hear you.
You feel like that barb is a barrier to entry there.
Well, that's another discussion. Do you think you have a better likelihood of really burying the hook without a barb? Because it's, less to push through. It's less mass to go through.
Yeah, I do think that can be the case.
I mean, I've heard lots of people argue that.
The barb is generally so shallow. It feels like that initial hook set is usually enough to get it in there. That's why it's so hard to get barbed hooks out sometimes if you leave the barb on. It's because it's pretty easy to get the barb into that first layer of flesh.
Mm-hmm. Again, it matters if it's micro barb or, I don't know, regular barb.
Sure, yeah. Some of those like mustad barbs you got to do some work to get them in there.
The eagle claw.
I know, like the classic, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of the modern hooks that are like really fine wire. Well, they're fine wire and then really fine point on the hook. And the whole idea is that, hey, with the finest point you can get, and then really the thinnest wire you can get away with, then you're going to get that penetration on this trout.
The B10S hook is the one I'm thinking of. That's
fair as a streamer hook or whatever. Yeah,
that's a very thin. That's a very thin point, and there's not much of a barb there. Like, I don't want to say it's depends on what size you're using, but if you're using like sixes, 8s, and 4s, they're probably not monster barbs on those.
B10S, but then almost every like Euro nymphing hook, right?
Yeah.
Many of the brands that are offering barbless hooks, they're often wide gap, thin wire, long point, and super skinny point, like fine needle point.
Yeah.
And all of those things add up to me, not a desirable hook. It'll penetrate easier, but it also adds up to being a weaker hook. The needle point can't take hits on rocks all that well. The long point actually blocks off some of the hooking the range, let's say, right? The gap, which is why they would go to a wider gap. And then, of course, the lighter wire, thinner wire is not as strong.
And the weight of the fish has a lot more leverage on that strength of the hook in a wide gap, kind of that really long arcing shank or whatever you call it, to the point. When some of our more standard straight shank hooks are pretty aggressive in that radius in the turn and don't have nearly the amount of power from the fish, at least.
Do you think the style of barbless hook matters, standard versus jig, as far as keeping the fish hooked longer or hooking the fish more frequently and keeping them hooked throughout the fight?
I do think, like in general, with like a heavy bead to hook ratio, I mean, I think you do have the opportunity to kind of like create some passive force against the hook staying in place. But I think that Dom's point about the adequacy of your fish fighting skills is kind of the takeaway. And I think that it also follows with with handling the fish afterwards. I think the skills to aspire to that really make a difference in mortality. So we obviously like where the hook penetrates the fish isn't necessarily something that you always know, but you definitely can learn to fight a fish efficiently and quick, and then handle it minimally. And I think that's where, for most of our listeners, probably there's a place to maybe like hone your skills and improve on. And for all of us too, I think that's what we should be cognizant of. Because I think we're fishing a fairly active style to begin with. If any of us saw, and I mean, I guess I would ask you guys, I know we talked about streamers a little bit, maybe articulated streamers, but is there any other, Bill, you said dry fly fishing too. So what could you do to like minimize the depth of hook embedding with a dry fly presentation? I don't know if you can.
Not catch the fish.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah,
If you really care that much about the fish, don't go
Mhm.
fishing.
yeah, yeah.
I'm serious. I keep getting this
Mhm.
question. I could show you guys 5 emails I got within the last 3 or 4 days.
Mhm.
Everybody's worried about, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't be catching too many fish." I don't know if some organization or some media outlet put an article out there that got circulated. I keep getting this question. Do you think we should just stop, trying to catch so many fish? I'm like, no, I don't. I think we should try to catch as many fish as we can. But like Trevor's saying, hook them, fight them fast, release them safely. We've
Mhm.
talked about
We've
this on
talked about it, yeah.
podcasts, right? Fish cold water,
Fish
fight them fast,
different areas.
release quickly. That's
Mhm.
it. And then
Yeah.
you're not, you can catch 50 fish a day and you're not going to hurt any of them.
Right.
You might, I grant you, yes, it's a blood sport. You're going to accidentally hook one in the eye.
Mhm.
And I say it like that because that's what it is. If you're fishing, you're going to hurt a fish. I'm sorry, that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Dom caught his nicest brown. Well, I say caught. He snagged his nicest brown of the day on Saturday.
Yeah, underneath it's
He told me the truth. He fessed up.
underneath the jaw, just underneath the jaw. So it fought like it was normal, but like it was hooked normally, but it wasn't. That was the only wild trout we caught. The big one that I caught.
So sorry.
Just kidding.
Back to hook styles. Jig hook,
Yeah.
standard hook was my question. Like,
Ooh,
do you
It's getting
think?
mean about it.
Yeah. Do you think it matters as
No.
far as keeping the fish hooked?
I don't.
You don't really fish too many jig hooks, do you, Dom?
I fish jig hook streamers because once you get, I'm going to say past 10, especially 8, size 8, then it matters. Then it'll actually invert and it'll matter. But I have an article, you guys know this, and maybe you're baiting me into it, Josh, about saying I have an article about the myth of the jig hook. And I'm talking about nymph jig hooks. They all, if you put a bead on a hook, they all ride upside down. I will be challenged on this endlessly. But if anybody actually wants to go and do the test yourself, you'll find that if you put a bead on a hook, it inverts. Almost all. I didn't try them all, right? I didn't try every hook, but I tried a lot. And I have pictures to prove it. Maybe I'll leave it in the show notes. It does. It just inverts. So Del, I guess my quick answer is no, I don't think it matters. But on a streamer, I guess I still don't think it matters. You think because what about on a streamer, Bill? Do you think it would matter? Because it's hooked, the hook is in the upper part of the jaw instead of like the lower part somehow.
I guess I think there might be a micro advantage to using
Yeah.
jig hooks as far as fish
Fair.
survival. I've started to use jig hooks a lot more in the last year.
On nymphs or streamers?
All the above.
Okay.
I feel like the barbless hook with the jig seems to stay embedded a little bit better. Maybe I don't know.
If it can get in there.
Yeah.
Because a jig hook blocks that downturn eye, blocks part of the gap that you're trying to hook the fish with.
It depends on what kind of jig hook. There's some that have
It does.
pretty wide
They'll make
gap.
wide gaps, right? And then it's a weaker hook.
And then not always. So the same
That's fair.
same thing with like scud hooks, I guess. Like
Yeah. I like Scud.
I guess to me, like scud hooks and jig hooks, when I hook a fish, I feel like they stay hooked
Yeah.
better. The only problem I have with jig hooks is I feel like I hook more fish in the top nose, like the center of the nose with those jig hooks. And I don't have the same leverage if I hook a fish in the side of its mouth with say a standard hook or even a scud hook. For those jig hooks I tend to hook more fish in the basically dead in the middle of the top of the nose. And
What's wrong with that though?
I was going to say, that's interesting that you say it's less leverage.
it is
I
a
know.
lot less leverage.
Interesting. Because you can't get them sideways.
Yeah. Because
Gotcha.
when they run upstream, they've got like all that.
Streamlined.
Yeah. They're
Yep.
streamlined and they're right. Versus if it's on the side, you have that kind of like, you're able to turn their heads better.
That's cool.
And I noticed that I hooked a couple like 15, 16 inch fish and I was like, oh man, these are
No, you didn't.
really,
No, you didn't.
these seem like they're really big fish. And I was like, I got them. It's like, that wasn't what I thought it was. And then like both and all of them seemed to be hooked in the nose. And I was like, this is a trend, but I don't know. Maybe I just suck.
Again, there's a big difference between a size 2 and a size 20 or even a size 4 and a size 12. There's a enormous difference.
Yeah.
And so barb, a micro barb on a size 16 nymph or dry fly. Come on. I mean, is it that hard to remove? No. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, but I do feel like this, like there is some sort of like sweet spot for like, I guess the least impactful fly on a fish.
Cool.
I do think, let's say 18 and under.
Yeah.
At times I feel like they have more of a tendency to suck that fly in, and it may be deeper versus if it's like I don't know, let's say 14 to 10. Like they're not necessarily going to suck that fly in and then potentially cause worse damage. But then when you get much higher than that, let's say 8s, 6s, and then so on, like those are bigger flies and you're going to do more damage to their jaw.
Yeah. Even with a micro barb.
Yeah. I'm saying with or without a barb. Like I just think those, I don't know.
Oh yeah. Good point.
That's just how I see, I guess, the impact on the fish based on the size of the hook that I'm using.
So if somebody really cares about all this, maybe they should only fish size 18 flies.
Well, no,
never fish a size 6.
He's saying go a little bigger.
I think 18s
go bigger.
I think 18s are worse than 14s for a fish.
Oh, because they'll go in deeper.
Yeah,
you mean?
no, because there's a better chance of swallowing it or getting it down in the gills because it's smaller and easier for them to digest quicker.
You see my point though. A larger wire is going to be, let's say, a size 4 wire. When it goes into that fish's jaw, it's going to be a way bigger hole than a size 18 with a barb.
It is, but
you know what I mean?
But is it, I guess the argument I'll have is you can take that size 4 and you can put it in the side of that fish's face. But the size 18, if it's smaller and a fish just sucks it into its gills faster, which does more damage.
Yeah, the gills are bad.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yep. A couple points here from just my reading today. One,
Trevor did some research. I want to thank you for that. But I shouted out, or in our group chat, I said, "Hey, Trevor, you want to do some scientific reading?"
It's always fun to read it, and I do apologize that I bash I'm truly not bashing the data,
the study.
Because there's a lot of good studies. I just think that there are some variables that are really hard to control.
Yeah,
especially when it comes to just angling skill.
Just like when we're talking about
for sure,
everything is relative.
But exactly. Yeah. But I do super appreciate that there is data out there and that people are doing studies and there's some.
Yeah.
The Fish Commission is interested in this. Idaho seems to be doing a lot of research, which is awesome. But anyway, treble hooks. People do think. Or people often, I think, assume treble hooks are going to be worse on a fish, but the interesting comment to that because the data showed no difference between treble hooks and single hooks, but the reason that they figured was because most fish could not swallow a treble hook as deeply, and so they were hooking them more on the periphery or on the outer part of their mouth, and so again, getting them out,
but getting them out,
and so. You could combine variables, like if you crimp barbs on a treble hook,
that's what I do.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, the boys and I use inline spinners. We build our own inline spinners. It's like a rooster tail doesn't matter. And I always just crimp all the barbs. I used to cut the extra 2 hooks and just go 1 hook, but whatever. We keep all 3, but then just debarb them. For our own sake. I mean it, for our own sake. And for, when you're transporting things, you're like, man, got hooked again. No, not a big deal.
Yeah.
The barb matters, man, for all of that stuff.
For sure. Yeah. And I don't know that I would ever make the case that like, hey, I don't think people should care, because I do think it matters, even if it's just in the practical sense, like you said, if it comes to pulling it out of your gear, pulling it out of your hand, you're going to do yourself a lot less damage, and you're going to do the fish less damage. Just looking at mortality as the single outcome is not always the best outcome to look at, because we do want to do the least amount of harm, right? And so even if it doesn't end up causing mortality to the fish, it still is nice to not leave it with a ragged jaw.
We've all seen that, right? Is it the mandible? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
On the side of the fish.
Smiley
those
trout.
Are gone. Right? We say the happy trout. He's not so happy because he lost his mandible, but it looks like he's smiling.
Muddy meathead.
Muddy meathead had a missing mandible. And that's very common. And I think we all agree, right? Doesn't that most often probably come from an angler trying to get a hook out? Whether it's barbed or not, shouldn't we all admit too that releasing a trout, getting that hook out, even if it's barbless, it isn't always just lickety split, it's out, right?
Yeah, honestly, especially barbed. I definitely think there's a big difference there. And it does depend on, what tools an angler carries with them. If they carry forceps and they can get it out more quickly or efficiently, or if they're skilled at doing it. So I do think, again, that there's always room to improve.
Well, kind of coaching my boys along for how to release bass and trout has kind of opened my eyes to these things that I'm sure all of us here kind of take for granted. You see the way the hook went in, and you get your forceps in there, and you just back it out 180 degrees from the way it went in. And I would watch my boys, kind of struggle, and I'm like, no, just, hey, give me that. And I get the forceps and shoot, pull it right out. Yeah. Not a big deal. You kind of just see it. But once again, that is experience. You bring up a good point, though, Trevor. I mean, you need the forceps, you need the tools, whatever, hemostats, forceps. Is that the same thing, Trevor? Is that the same word?
Yeah, kind of.
Anyway.
Yeah.
You could be knuckle dragging and have your Walmart pliers.
Anyway, fishing,
but whatever tool you're using, have it at the ready. You shouldn't have to dig in your bag for even 30 seconds to be able to get your forceps out and quickly then get the hook out. I would argue that if you have that correct angle, that 180 degree angle, just slide it right out. High 90s, 95, 97, whatever percent of the time, it comes right out, even if it's a micro barb.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like with all this, I think we'd all agree that if there's not a really specific reason for using the barb to your advantage, like keeping it on the bend of the hook in a tractor trailer or in a dry dropper rig, then just don't let it become a crutch. Like if you're using a barb for a good reason, or a crimped barb even for a good reason, then use it. But if you don't have a good reason, then it's just a crutch to you, and you're just doing it to keep more fish on the line when you could do the same thing by learning how to fight a fish well.
Yeah, nice. I used to keep when I fished tricos and zebra midge, anything below like a size 20, I would keep the barb on. I would think like, oh, I need every little advantage I can get. I don't do that anymore. Number one, I don't care. Like Bill said, you can lose some fish. You go, okay, that's okay. I'm all right with it.
Yeah.
And number two, my fish fighting skills have gotten better. And I feel like that barb just doesn't even help me at all.
It does this like certain angles. Like you'll notice it's not like just about tension alone, but also the angle that the fish is at. Like say you got the fish direct. You say you've let the fish get directly below you, and you're holding the rod high, right upstream. Like it doesn't matter if you've got tension. That fish shakes his head. Good chance it's going to pop out. And so it's not just about tension alone, but obviously the angle of attack that you've got your rod at, and you kind of just learn. It becomes sort of second nature to be like, oh, I'm in a bad spot. Switch the position, or I'm going to lose this fish, and you switch it, and you don't lose the fish. Side pressure is big, obviously.
Yeah. So take it as a challenge. Fish barbless to get better at fish fighting. There you go. It's the Troutbitten challenge.
Since 2006, Yeti has been building products for anglers who fish hard and share an addiction for the woods and the water. Yeti changed the industry with their legendary coolers by featuring rugged but simple designs built to last for generations and stand up to whatever Mother Nature might bring. Yeti now takes that same functional and elegant design to everything in their lineup, from soft coolers to drinkware, bags, and more. The new Yeti Go Box gear cases have become my daily storage solution for a life on the water. Offered in 3 sizes, the Go Boxes are rugged and waterproof at home on a boat or in the back of a pickup. All Yeti Go Boxes offer smart storage solutions with removable cargo trays and dividers, and the Pack Attic is a set of zippered pockets conveniently housed in the interior lid of the 30 and 60 sizes. Lockable, light, and nearly indestructible. I use the 15 size Go Box for camera gear and the 30 size for organizing my reels, fly boxes, leaders, tippet, and everything else that keeps me fishing. The Yeti Loadout Go boxes are the perfect angler's companion. Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer.
So, do you think a new angler should only use barbless hooks? I could make the argument that they probably should.
Mm-hmm. Based on all
Because-
we said, right? That everything would, if they're worse at fish fighting, so it's going to take them longer
Yeah.
to land a fish, and they're not as skilled at removing the hooks.
Release them.
Yeah.
Right.
Then
the big one.
100%.
But
Yeah.
they're gonna lose more fish because
Sure,
they're not as
slightly.
skilled, and that's a hump you got to get over. But
Yeah.
that comes back to it's better for the fish, and so that's the decision you have to make: is do you care about the fish and do you want to catch them again someday, bigger and better? And so to use the barbless hook, I would make the argument the beginner is probably the person who should focus on that the most, because their
a good point.
room for error is much larger.
Interesting, because I almost thought about it backwards. I thought a beginner might need every little advantage they can get, keep that micro barb on there. Most fly fishing hooks are micro barbs these days, and keep that on there because every little advantage you can get, you're trying to learn fish fighting skills. You're trying to learn how to keep the tension on. But yeah, once it's in the net and you're trying to get the fish out or trying to get the hook out, you're right. I think I should change my way of thinking there.
I think you'll learn faster. Even
Change my
even
way of
before
thinking.
before the fish is in the net, you're still going to learn faster if you're doing it
Yeah.
barbless.
It'll force you to
Oh,
learn
yeah.
the correct
Yeah.
way, right? Yeah.
You're gonna, if you start with a barb and then you think you've gotten pretty good, you switch to barbless, and all of a sudden they start popping off. It's like, oh, I never actually got good at this.
I don't know how many years ago it was, but whatever, 5, 6, 8 years ago, everything's barbless in my box. Occasionally, I guess there are some flies that I'll forget to pinch it. Like my green weenie, for example, I continue to just use the same hook I always have, just for tradition. I have probably 1,000 of them too. And occasionally I'll realize, I didn't pinch that barb down. They're all either bought barbless or pinched down for me. But let's put it this way. Like I certainly don't judge anybody who's not fishing a barbless hook. I'm like, that's almost the least of my worries. It's like, how did you fight the fish and how did you release it? And like you said, Trevor, even the data supports that.
Yeah,
Like,
it does. Absolutely. And I think in some ways it's a confusing conversation because the data all points to the fact that it doesn't matter if you have a barb or not. But I think, right, the conversation within that conversation is that it does matter depending upon how you do X, Y, and Z. And so I think what we would like our listeners to take away is, I love that you accept the fact that this is a blood sport, right? Like we know that fish are going to be harmed. And I like that because it's honest and it's not trying to kind of paint over something that we all kind of acknowledge. And yet at the same time, as people who engage in this sport that we love, we do care about the resource and we care about the fish and we want to do the least harm possible. So within that context, I do think that fishing barbless, it's hard to argue that it isn't doing the most good, or there's more reasons to fish barbless than there are to fish barbed in general when it comes to trying to protect the fish. So it's just not going to bear out in the type of data that exists currently because of the heterogeneity to the anglers that are involved in those studies. And
Dr. Big Words.
that's just
Dr. Big Words. That's what he called him.
Yep.
He called him Dr. Big Words. That's the best. Heterogeneity. That's what
Heterogeneity. Yeah.
I was thinking about that too. That was the word.
Right?
I really.
You and me, Deli. That's what I woke up thinking.
Cartilaginous.
Anything else, guys?
All bleeding stops eventually.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's your screen name tonight.
Yeah.
Dr. Big Words.
Trevor, thank you for your service, by the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No.
I was going to, I
Yes.
wish I'd thank you, Austin, for pointing that out. Mr. Air Force,
Yep.
right? I
Yep.
was going to introduce you that way.
Thanks.
It's
Yep.
Veterans Day as we record this.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks to all the veterans out there who have served. Certainly.
Good point.
Yeah. A lot of good people out there.
So this really might be one of the topics where I feel like we covered everything.
Mhm.
We can hardly ever say that. I feel like we've almost covered all our bases.
Oh
here.
no, we'll get some random comments. You didn't talk about this. You suck.
That might be. I think we can kind of summarize it this way, and it's very much what you were just saying, Trevor. Like a barb never helps a fish, right? It may help us
Right.
every once in a while. And maybe sometimes it can help a beginning angler quite a bit. And like Deli said, you got to make your decisions. I certainly, again, wouldn't judge anybody for using a barb, but pinch them down, as soon as you get that confidence.
Mhm.
And I think you will always see manufacturers making barbed hooks.
Yeah.
And like Sloop said, pinch them down. It's my decision, not yours, right?
Good old slooper.
This is America.
Yep.
We make our own decisions.
Our hooks are made in Korea.
Oh boy. Who's reading us out?
The best reader, Austin.
Oh, Austin gets it again.
Nominee.
Oh, no, you did it last time. I'll do it this
Austin,
time. I'm on it.
Well, I read the last question.
You see what he
Yeah.
did? You see what he did there?
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, Austin. Oh, never mind.
Never
A
mind.
little,
Yeah.
little
I'm going out on the high note.
backhanded compliment.
Third paragraph was a little different. I don't mean to,
I don't care.
challenge you. Dr. Trevor Smith, thank you for your service. Will you read us out?
Remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,500
He
articles,
deepened his
videos,
voice.
and
He's
podcasts
showing
with
off.
endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and tags too.
Oh, I like how he said
Be sure to
navigate.
find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tips series, the Troutbitten Fly Box, and the Fly Fishing the Monorig, all in collaboration with Wilds Media. You'll also find the Fish and Film videos and the new Riverside series, all in their own playlists on the Troutbitten YouTube. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a comment, because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
Oh, he's the one they call Dr. Big Words.
Hey, now.
I did. You know what I caught myself saying? Twice I said the Troutbitten, like on the Troutbitten YouTube. It's a real central Pennsylvania thing to say.
On the YouTube.
On the Facebook.
Yeah. I central PA'd it.
The Walmarts.
The Walmart.
Going down the Walmart mall. Going down the sheets.
That's so
Yeah.
good.
Well said, Charlie.
I use both. I guess I'm a bad person
Should have left it in your book bag.
because they just seem to suck it in.
Change my way of thinking.
If you really care that much about the fish, don't go fishing.
Not catch the fish.
Heterogeneity.
Ooh, Dr. Big Words.
Heterogeneity.
Ooh, Dr. Big Words.
Heterogeneity.
Ooh, Dr. Big Words. So you didn't talk about this. You suck.